What's up, everybody? We are going into Micheal and Young Fly Shop here in Vancouver. We're going to talk to Tim Arsenault, who's the manager there, and the plan is to go over some spring steelhead equipment, bull trout equipment, give you kind of a good rundown of rods and reels, lines, tips, stuff you need. Apply him with a bunch of beers, and then he gives us all our secrets.
Oh, yeah. I love it. That's actually amazing. Yeah, that's a good idea.
So I got Tim here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna do a run through of all kind of gear that we're gonna be fishing here in the spring. Tim's a pretty accomplished guy, manager here at Micheal and Young Fly Shop, seasoned two-handed casting instructor, knows a thing about selling fishing gear. Would you say?
Maybe. Kind of.
Yeah. The plan today is we're gonna run through rods, reels, definitely a whole bunch of lines. Stuff. And so part of this project, I would say, is just to take a little bit of that intimidation factor out. I'll ask you dumb questions. Yeah. You used to dumb questions in the shop?
My favorite one. There's no dumb questions.
And we can just sort of run through a few little things and go through what you like and what sells well and what is mostly used up around here.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Let's talk rods here. Let's start right up the hop. If we are looking for an all-around spring steelhead rod that we can fish steelhead, bull trout on a two-handed system, what are we looking at?
I mean, usually for most people, the first consideration when they're buying a rod is actually budget. But the good news is they don't really make any bad rods anymore. And great rods are available all the way from about $300, $350, right up to $1,800, $1,900 to $1,900, $2,000. So just, you don't have to be intimidated about price. There's something good to fit everyone's budget, number one. So around here in our neck of the woods, for steelhead, generally we would consider, an all-around rod to be a 13-foot 7 weight or a 13-foot 7/8. The 13-foot 7 tends to be, or the 13-foot 8 is a bit of a 30-06 for us. It's something you can take anywhere and fish anywhere. Now that can change due to your venue. Here in our neck of the woods, we're dealing with slightly larger rivers. We don't have a ton of bankside obstruction. We can get away with these longer rods. But if you're fishing small coastal rivers, say in Oregon or other places, you may want to pick a shorter rod to deal with that kind of stuff. 11-foot 6, 12-foot 7, 8 is going to be a great way to go. Everything we're stocking is very usable and very functional, regardless of whether it's $2,000 or $300. One of the big things in spey casting, or just casting in general, single-handed or not, is these are what make the casts, right? And so all the rods that you see over here, they're all great rods. Every single one of them, from the bottom end right up to the top. The biggest gains you're ever going to make in your casting or making this gear perform are going to be actually just refinements of basic casting technique.
If I'm coming into the shop, I'm interested in kind of getting a entry-level setup that's going to give me some longevity here over the next couple of years while I improve my casting, sort of get better. I don't have a huge budget, but I'm happy to spend a few bucks to get a good rod in my hand. Do you have like one or two that are kind of on the shelf here that you would recommend?
Yeah, I mean, a Sage Sonic would be a really good choice. Great rod, medium fast, has a great flex to it. You're looking at about $1,150 for one of those. It's an awesome rod, great for the beginner. It's going to provide potential for someone who builds their casting up. So it's not a rod that you're going to outgrow really quickly. It's a great stick.
What about something that's just like a real entry-level stick?
Oh yeah. So if you're starting out, really hard to go wrong with an Echo rod. The Echo Swing, which comes in a 7 or an 8 weight in the 13-foot to 13-foot 6 range, but right about $400 for one of these guys. And if you want to step up slightly and get an even better rod for a great price, an Echo TR is a great way to go.
Timmy's going to show us a couple single-handed rods. So if we are saying we're not interested in spey casting, but we want to start with a single-handed rod, maybe like a good bull trout rod, 6-7 weight, would you say?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously single-handed rods that they much like two-handed rods, they run the complete span depending on price. But a few things to consider outside of price would be the length of the rod. So when I did a lot of single hand casting for steelhead, I used a 10-foot 8-weight, which I really like. One of the things that's cool about a 10-footer is it gives you the ability to roll cast really well, which can be really helpful because steelhead and bull trout sometimes kind of live in places where there's a lot of vegetation really close to the bank. A 10-footer also gives you a lot of line control, so you're able to mend better, you're able to control the line a little bit better. The 9-foots are great, 9-foot 6s are great too. Typically when I look at a 9-foot rod, I really like those for like more wide open, extremely windy fisheries like beach fishing, maybe the Harrison, something like that. Is a 9-foot 6 is kind of right in the middle. It's not like super long, whereas you're beach fishing and the wind's going to push it all over the place. It's something you could use for a dual purpose, so pretty sweet. But I do like a 10-footer myself. That's always.
If you were to point us in the direction of, let's say, a 10-foot rod that would bode well here for south coast of BC, what would you be looking at?
I mean, pretty tough to go wrong with the new Sage R8.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah,
you don't have any stock.
Yeah, they're really popular. We're sold out.
Okay, that's good. That's a good.
I mean, it doesn't much matter. I mean, there's great stuff right across the spectrum. Sure. Your budget will dictate, and like a great fly shop, should be able to help you pick a great rod for the price that works for you.
Yeah, no, that's good. That gives us a good rundown of rods. All right. Okay, that's a good rundown. Two-handed rods, single-handed rods. I don't think we have to make it more complicated than that. What should we talk about next?
Well, we can talk about reels. Reels go on rods.
Ah, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, those things go together. There's two kind of categories that reels will fall into. So there's reels with drag, and these guys here would be great examples of reels that have drag on them. And so these are really nice because when you're fighting a fish and he runs, you can take your hand off the reel, which is awesome. And then there's reels, and I mean, this is the stuff I prefer to fish. These are more the classic style of reels. So the idea with these is they don't really have a drag. Like, they've got a spring in there that provides enough tension that if a fish runs really quick and you don't get your hand on the reel fast enough, it's not gonna spin out and overrun. But the cool thing with these is it's just like you and a fish in a wheel. You're essentially applying pressure to the back of the spool to create that drag. And I've always really liked that because it's just a really cool connection to the fish. I'm also a big fan of these hardy reels, and I fish some older ones, and I really like the aesthetic of these reels, and I like the connection to the past.
Let's say somebody that wants a reel that's going to give them a little bit of longevity and not fall apart in the first month of use. What are they looking at?
You can get like a Redington Behemoth. This is a very serviceable reel. It's a couple $100. The $200 to $300 reel just gets better every year. Every year I'm surprised more and more how durable they are, how long they're lasting. I personally have a pile of these for my own business at home. I have a line company. They've held up really well.
Wait for the shameless plug here. That was a good tip, by the way, of talking about line weights to reels, because a lot of the time you don't know exactly what you need, right? So when you're looking at these reels here, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, is that we need to have, if you're putting a big heavy duty, shooting head on these lines, you're going to need a bigger reel just from a capacity standpoint.
100%. If
you need some backing.
You get a 7-weight Spey and you get a 7-weight reel, it's not going to hold enough line. Get a reel that's 2 to 3 line sizes higher than, again, a 7, we need to be looking at a 9 or a 10. If we're getting an 8, we need to be looking at a reel that holds a 10 or an 11. And that's really important.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
All right, that's a good rundown of reels. Aaron Goodis,
going?
When you want to plug anything, you got books, pictures,
all that stuff.
All right, good.
Buy my pictures.
We did rods, we did reels, and now we're gonna run through fly lines. Yeah.
If you're gonna do steelhead, bull trout, single hand, all that kind of fishing in the spring, this reel Versatip is such a great way to go. It's a floating line, the body of it, and it comes with a loop on the end of it right there. This comes with a wallet full of tips, okay? And it comes with a floating tip, an intermediate tip, a type 3 tip, and a type 6 tip. You can change the tips, right? So the great thing with this loop system is this is 4 lines in one. This is a great compact way with your single-handed stuff to have a lot of versatility in the way that you're fishing. And then, if you need tips that sink faster than these, You can always buy those sink tips. We're going to go through some of those sink tips, but you can buy them and you can loop them onto this. So it's a very modular system that definitely caters to a lot of different conditions. This would be my #1 pick for a line for any of your single hand stuff.
Let's talk two-handed rods.
Yeah.
A lot of the time when we're guiding, we have people that might not have a ton of two-handed experience. What we do is we usually upgrain the weight of the line a little bit, which makes it kind of easier to roll the rod over. If you're a competent caster, that's almost becomes a little bit cumbersome, would you say?
Yeah, for sure. Generally, when you're first starting, we want to maybe slightly go to the heavier end of the spectrum. The weight's helping you feel that more, and it's sort of telling you when things are going well. As time goes on and you get better, you know, lighter lines can definitely work well. So this line delivers sink tips and large flies better than any other line on the market. So there's some other benefits to this line outside of the capacity it has for larger flies and heavier sink tips. Another great thing about these lines is they're the easiest Spey line ever to cast. If you're looking to get out there and make some casts and have less struggle, this is a wonderful line to start with. The longer a line is, the more room I need behind me before I clip the trees or rocks or any of that stuff behind me. With these lines, another great benefit to them is they're really short, so they're easy to fish near obstructions. And obstructions are generally something we come across quite frequently in our steelhead fishing. Sure. So long and short of it is, spring steelhead, spring bull trout, generally speaking, Skagit Lines the way to go.
What we got here is Timmy's going to show us a few different of shooting lines or running lines that you can look at.
So what I like is a monofilament similar to this one. You know, monofilament's great. One thing you'll notice, it's a little coily, so when you're using it, you got to give it a bit of a stretch. But it's really thin and it shoots really far, and it's usually about 1/3 of the price of what you'll find in a typical shooting line. So then on the other end of the spectrum, you have what we call like a fly line style shooting line or a coated shooting line. And so these are a lot like your typical fly line. They're just really thin. So these are easy to hold on to. You know, they don't shoot as far as this guy, but a lot of times they're a little bit easier to handle. Now, the cool thing is these days they've actually made something in between, which is called Grip Shooter. Rio makes a product called Grip Shooter. And so this has where you actually have your hand attached, where you're holding onto the shooting line, is your fly line style, kind of like what you're finding in this guy. But then behind about 10 feet of that, 15 feet of that, is monofilament.
Oh, cool.
So, you know, this will require a stretch, but it won't slip out of your hands as easy. So this seems to be a great workaround for a lot of folks when it comes. So what am I doing now? Now we're talking sink tips, right?
We'll give you a little bit of rundown of just straight tips, lengths, what T8s and T14s and what all this shit means. So,
and there's just a ton of options here, right? A really great thing to do is just get 10 feet of T8, 10 feet of T11, and 10 feet of T14. That's a great place to start. Those are level sink tip materials, T8, T11, T14. T stands for tungsten, which is what's the additive to this tip that's making it sink. And the number is how many grains per foot. 10 feet of T14 will weigh 140 grains. 10 feet of T8 would weigh 80 grains. Well, 140 grains is gonna sink faster than 80 grains because it's just more weight. You can run into a situation sometimes where 10 feet of T8 is too heavy and it's snagging on the bottom. You'd need a lighter sink tip than one of these just to comb the shallow ends. So these Mo tips are essentially shorter portions of this T material attached to a floating section to lengthen it out to 10 feet. You can fish a 7.5 foot tip of T11, but because it has this 2.5 of float attached to it, bringing it up to 10 feet, it casts like a 10-foot tip, even though you're getting the short one.
Professional shops like this come in handy where you can't get this service online. You can't get a big box store. You come into these little shops here, and these guys know exactly what line is going to go with what rod and what's going to work for you. So tell us where you're at. Tell us who you are, where they can find you.
My name's Tim. I work at Micheal & Young. I'm the manager of the Vancouver location. You may have or may not have seen Aaron in the video. He's another guy who's here all the time. You can find me here at the Broadway location if you have any questions about anything we've done. Spring steelheading is a difficult yet rewarding pursuit. And that's that. Yeah.
Yeah.